All righty. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome again. Good morning. I get around. I didn't get a chance. I do my rounds. I don't get a chance to shake hands. Sometimes I get to shake hands twice. So not today. Everybody got a bulletin out there? The bulletin doesn't have the most important announcement. And it didn't happen until this morning. Little Fallon, I don't know her middle name. Fallon Sansone was born around 9 o'clock this morning, Texas time. 7 pounds, I think 13 ounces, I think something like that. Everybody's doing great.
A lot of people didn't know that your daughter was pregnant, so you might want to tell them that.
Hey, by the way, my daughter was pregnant.
She was. For 9 months.
For 9 months, yeah. Just let me know. That's what happens. She's up in Texas. Nobody sees her. So everybody's doing fine. Sarah's doing good. She's watching the other 2 grandkids, chasing them around the house. So it's all good. Other than that, prayer on Wednesday, and then men, we got about. Need to get to me. Let me know if you're going to be able to make it for the men's retreat coming up here at 17th and 19th. Our subject matter will be talking about what does it mean to be a godly man. So we'll talk about that, define that. Not beating each other up unnecessarily, but to really understand, just like in very practical details, what it means to be godly. It's easy to say, but what does it mean? So that'll be our subject matter for our retreat. Is there anything else going on that I need to know about? Anybody else giving birth that I wasn't aware of? No? Okay, just check. All right. On that note, okay, so this morning I want to pre-warn you. You want to make sure you have your Bibles, and I'll let you get your marker there ahead of time if you want. So Leviticus 26 is where we're going to land at, and where I'm going to need you to be having your own Bibles, because I just wasn't going to put on the overhead everything that was there. So there you go. Let's pray and then dive into the Word of God. Father God, we just thank you. We thank you for your Word. We thank you, Father, for the times when your Word speaks to us things that are hard to hear. Father, I just thank you that Father, you are not interested in always tickling our ears, always. Sometimes you have to deliver news to us that is not happy, not joyful. It can be very difficult. And so, Father, I pray that this morning, as we take a look at some very challenging scriptures, Lord, not because they're hard to interpret, but because they're easy to interpret, that we would endure them and learn from them. And we just ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So we've been going through Daniel's prayer in Daniel chapter 9. Today, racing through, just cover a couple more verses. I was going to try to go from verse 11 through 14, but then I realized 13 and 14 really go into his next statements that he's going to be making when he invites them to turn towards the Lord, speaking not for himself but for everybody. Everyone loves God's blessing. Everybody here loves God's blessing. We all love it when we're blessed by God. Absolutely. If ever a people enjoyed the blessings of God, it was the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel enjoyed those blessings. Very much so. They were, when you think about it, they were spectacularly emancipated from Egypt. I mean, they got to see God at work doing things, it wasn't just like, hey, some army came, or like Moses led some army in there and just got him out. It's like, no, he had no army. He had God. God coming in there and doing 10 miracles to show who was God, really, and to get them out of that country. And they were, and even today when we look at Leviticus, there's a part there where he says, God brought them out so that they would no longer be slaves and held under the yoke and bondage of Egypt. That's what he did. And so that's spectacular. They were given an abundant land. What a blessing. They were given this land. This was like coming in, and he knew that God was going to give them the victories. They would have to do some battles, but God was going to do the war. They were going to bless them. They were gifted with powerful leaders and prophets. So they weren't like aimless. They had good leaders, from their judges to their kings. Some of them were not so good, but they still had leaders, people pointing the way. And a lot of prophets, so there wasn't just like administrative leadership that they had. They had spiritual leadership. They enjoyed this. They had people that had communion with God, be able to direct their way. When you do think of armed battles and stuff, many times over, they had to beat the odds in order to be victorious. In other words, God had to do their fighting for them, not just to take the land, but to keep it. So this was where they were at. They witnessed a nation, as a nation, they witnessed God's miracles, not in myths and stories. Sometimes they talk about, those myths, those legendary stories. None of that. That is not how they operated. They got to see it real time. It wasn't like, we've heard these ancient stories from way back. But no, they got to see God at work, doing his thing, either in discipline or in blessing all the time. And you know what? It's the most amazing thing about all of this. Just amazing. Is that these people were doing everything they could to ditch God. Get him out of their lives. That was the ongoing problem. To say, and it is amazing. When you think about it as far as like, if you just study anthropology and religions and stuff like that, most of the folks are not fighting to get rid of their God. Around the world we see that. You see all these different ones that are not battling to get rid of it. Whereas Israel was constantly running away from God. That's amazing. But I'm amazed myself when I choose to do something other than what God would want me to do. It's just as amazing. I'm flabbergasted with my own self. Why would I do that, Lord? Why would I do something to rebel against you? In either the small or the large way. It doesn't matter. Just, why would I do that? Why? But I have friends in Israel because they did the same thing. And so, when we understand this is just amazing because these were folks who lived in a blessing all the time. I don't know about you guys, but I live in a blessing. The blessing of eternal life. I have it. Even if I have nothing else, I have that. And yet, these folks would endure a curse. They would endure a curse. So, as Daniel's going through this prayer, he's been confessing, taking a look at who's been responsible, and he's going to come back to that again in just a moment. But he'd been looking at Scripture. He looked at Jeremiah, and he saw in Jeremiah that there was to be this 70-year time period. But now he's going to go further into why did we have to do this? Why did we have to endure this 70 years away from our home, away from our nation, our country, where the temple of God is and should be? I think you have to keep that in mind. Their whole identity was over there, back in Israel. That's where the temple was supposed to be, not in any other place, according to their understanding. That we enjoy a different understanding. For us, the Lord lives in our hearts. So we have wherever we are, the Lord is. completely different, but for their culture, where they were from, Israel, where the temple was, that was everything. And they were not there. They were away. And so, Daniel obviously had the law with him. At least the first 5 books also. I think he had some of the prophets too. So he had the word, and so he was obviously going through the first 5 books, and he was obviously familiar with Leviticus and Deuteronomy. And so today we're going to, like I said, we're going to be hitting Leviticus. And the first part is the blessing that Israel should have enjoyed. And that's in Leviticus 26, 3 through 10. And I do have that one to where we can see it. It's just that the curses are so many, that it's just hard to do. So, again, Daniel in his prayer and confession is going to emphasize who was at fault or who was guilty. In Daniel 9:11, he says, all Israel has transgressed your law and turned aside, refusing to obey your voice. Now this gives you and I, as Christians, additional context that we've already been looking at, but I want to really focus in on, is that Daniel is speaking about Israel. Now, does this mean none of it, there's no principles that can apply to us? No, there are. But the basic message, the meat of everything, is all being directed at Israel and what their condition is, how they got there. Because keep in mind, for Daniel, there is no church. There is no New Testament. He doesn't have any of that. He has the law of Moses. And that's exactly what he's speaking about. That's what he's thinking about. This agreement of God that Israel made with Moses. Sometimes it's called the covenant of the law, or the Mosaic covenant, because this is this agreement that was made. We find out about this agreement in the book of Exodus. In the book of Exodus, they're getting ready to see the Lord and everything. In Exodus 19, verse 5 and 6, God is speaking. He says, now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all the people. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel. So this is God. He's talking to Moses. Is this what he's going to speak? This deal. This is what he's going to do. Who his people are going to be. He's like, you will be mine. I'll be yours. This is what you got to do. Like any good deal, it's ratified. Now, if you're familiar with your Bible, you're familiar with a couple different covenants. Remember, there was the Abrahamic covenant. When Abraham made that covenant, it was made by a sacrifice of splitting animals in two and spreading them between 2 rocks. That was the custom. And then the 2 people that made the deal would walk between the rocks. And then that covenant would be ratified. And that covenant was where God said, hey, Abraham, I'm going to make a people out of you. I will be your God. And on, and I'll multiply you. And I will bring the seed of salvation through your seed, Abraham. That's what I'm going to do. And then Abraham thought he was going to have to walk between the rocks, but he didn't. He sees God alone walking through the rock. So in other words, God said, this is all on me. But now this Mosaic covenant, this covenant of the law, is not so. Because in Exodus 19:8, we see where the people are there. They answered Moses posted that statement to them, and they said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And Moses reported the words of the people of the Lord, as if he had to do that.
Yeah.
I just love it. It's like, God, this is what they said. And I know. But there it is. They ratified it. They said they would do these things. And keep in mind, this is not just the 10 Commandments. This is the 613 commandments that are there. As they said, they were obligating themselves to do just that. And so that's how the laws work. And of course, the law had more than just sweet by and by ramifications. It had more than that. It had immediate ramifications for their lives and what would happen. There was many laws that were there for just pure cleanliness, which would have an immediate effect for everybody. You know, they had laws about watching out for fungus in houses and stuff like that. You know, so all sorts of laws about all sorts of things that would have immediate physical ramifications for them. But then there was also cultural ramifications. All these things, though, had to be obeyed. And that obedience would have temporal ramifications, not just eternal ramifications. And that's but first, before we do that, when we think of those ramifications, of course, automatically, everybody thinks ramifications, bad. Well, there was also good ramification, the blessing. And so, in Leviticus 26, the first part of it, it talks about these blessings that would be there for them. In Leviticus 26, verse 3 through 7, and I do have this, it says, if you walk in my statutes, that be the Lord, and observe my commandments to do them, then verse 4, I will give you your rains in their season, the land shall yield its increase, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. Your threshing, in other words, that's when they bring in the food and they separate it from all the chaff, your threshing shall last to the time of the grape harvest, and the grape harvest shall last to the time for sowing. So in other words, there would be overlap. And we'll talk about that in a second. It says, you shall eat your bread to the full and dwell in your land securely. Verse 6, and I will give peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and none shall make you afraid. What a great, great thought. And I will remove harmful beasts from the land, and the sword shall not go through your land. Verse 7, it says, you shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall before you by the sword. Goes on in verse 8 through 10, it says, 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 shall chase 10,000. In other words, it'd be so fearful that people, their enemies would be like, this is where it's like, and they'd just see one, and they would go skittering off. You know, that's exactly what he gets at. But later on, he's going to have something to say about them when they fail. Something that's like, a little leaf rustling will make you guys run away. So he's playing on that very thing. It says, verse 9 says, I will turn to you and make you fruitful and multiply you and confirm my covenant with you. You shall eat the old store long kept, and you shall clear out the old to make way for the new. There it is, just a picture of abundance. I don't want to talk a lot about these because that's what Daniel is not focusing in on this right now. But I want you to be aware of what their promises were. This is what God said he would do for them. And when you look through their history, you see those times of blessing. They did experience these blessings again and again. Of course, we also know that it was the very times of blessing that led them to times of disobedience, which is, again, sad and amazing. Take a look at the highlights. We got those here. The highlights of that is they would have bountiful harvests. As the Lord was going to take care of their provision. He was going to keep them fed. That's what we need, right? That's what. Hey, when I go to work, I'm not going to work for fun. I'm going to work so I can, have money to pay the roof over my head. Put some pizza in the oven, we're good to go. It's like that's what it's about. And so there it is. And so the next one, they would have security from the hazards within the land. He's like, don't worry about those beasts. We're going to watch out for them. And anything that would come and get you, you're not going to be afraid. You're going to have security. They would have military might. That would be the next one. That military might, both defensive and offensive. In other words, they were not just secure from anything going on in the land. Some people even said that the beasts of the land could be considered from the littlest thing like a germ to lions and tigers and bears. Just like the whole thing. It's just like, so it just covers all those possibilities. The last part really puts it together, because the way he had said it, it says, the people will multiply and they will have so much extra that what is extra will be tossed out for fresh provision. Boy, that's where, when we read these things as Americans, I'm sympathetic with that. Like, man, we have enjoyed these kind of blessings. Is this written for us? I don't know about that. Some people could make a case for that. But by godly principles, it looks like we're enjoying something like that. But again, the context of this is for Israel. Okay, so context is king, it's for Israel. But principles to live by, boy, as a nation following after the Lord, or trying to, you could make a case for that. Okay? So, however, all these blessings, remember at the very beginning, they're conditional. They're conditional upon the obedience of the nation to the law. So what would happen if they decided to disobey? That lead to the curse. And if you're familiar with this, the parallel passage to this is in Deuteronomy 28. And Bill and I were joking about this. We were talking about that it's a parallel passage. It has the same flavor, but it talks about itself a little bit differently. And we were thinking Leviticus was written early on in Moses' ministry of his 40 years in the desert. And so it just humored me. I'm thinking about now Moses at the end of the 40 years, and he's writing the same kind of stuff, the same blessings and curses, but now he's like, hey, when he was probably being told by the Lord in Leviticus 26, he's like, oh, really? I don't see us doing that. What? But by the time he gets to Deuteronomy 28, he's like, oh yeah, this is what you guys are all about. Completely, because it is different, and in Deuteronomy 28, the curses are a little bit longer. It has more to say about it, and very specific. That's what's scary about it. When I was listening and reading this, I'll be honest, my heart ached, because it's real. And it was a product of their disobedience. And yet, when you think about what it brought to them, it brought death. It brought pestilence. It brought starvation. It brought military defeat. It brought enslavement again. Loss of property, everything. Devastation. So it's hard for us, and it should be painful to read it. If we read it and just like, oh yeah, those bad guys, you've missed it. Because that's what Daniel has been all about. Daniel's been all about and saying, we did this. We are guilty. That's why he even started this. He said, all Israel has done this, and he includes himself. Very humbling. He understands mutual responsibility. Paul talks about this. He talks about it it's like if one member of the family is hurting, everybody's hurting. Something to keep in mind. So, how does he lead off with this? Leviticus 26, 14 through 16. He says, but if you will not listen to me and will not do all these commandments, if you spurn my statutes and if your soul abhors my rules, so that you will not do my commandments, but break my covenant, then I will do this to you. There it is. That's his preamble to the curses, what he will do. Now, as we read through this, one of the things I'll hit now and not really talk about, because I just want to really talk about the condition, is throughout Leviticus 26, if you study it on your own, you'll see that he has multiple times of if you change your mind, if you turn around, if you want to start doing the right thing, we'll get it back to normal. So we have multiple opportunities of repentance to turn, get around. And what's interesting is when Moses is giving this in Leviticus 26 and in Deuteronomy, he's giving a scope, a panoramic picture of what they do in their history. That's why it's so hard, because they endured this. And if to get pictures of this, you'd have to think about current situations around the world where places are just devastated, usually by war. Usually war devastates most areas. We see that. But it's just, I'll hit that again. I'm getting ahead of myself. So, you follow along in your Bibles. So sorry, right here, we're going to stay on this, Charlie, for a little while, till I get down to when I read Leviticus 26, 34, 35. So right now, take a look at your Bibles, and if not, just follow on through these highlights. Verse 16 goes on and talks about a panic. See, this is the thing, they would have panic. Boy, that sounds familiar. It's like we get panic. This is wasting disease and fever that consume the eyes and make the heart ache. And what they plant, their enemies will eat. So this begins, rather than having harvests that they would enjoy, they would have pestilence, and your enemies are going to eat your food. That's usually the case, especially when armies come through. Armies are hungry. This was especially the case for like the Japanese army. During their time, they had hardly any provisions. So when they went through, their whole provisions was whatever they could gather in the land. That's what made them even more fearsome, because they would just go through and steal everybody's food. So for the Americans, when we were in World War II, we were constantly had provisions. Our country was feeding us. We weren't going there to eat everything else that everybody else had. Very different. But you could imagine just popping in, like, okay, we want all your food. But what about us? We're going to starve. Didn't matter. That's exactly what would happen. That's why people got really good at hiding food. Remember, Gideon did it. Like, where was the food? It was hiding underneath some threshing thing. Had to hide it. Keep the guys from getting it. Verse 17 and verse 25, it talks about their enemies will win. They will not have victories. They will experience defeats. That'll be the story of the day, rather than victory, winning. And they will also talk about rebellion, which we saw. We see that happen throughout their history. Instead of victory, they get rebellion. And further war would bring disease with it. That's always the case in warfare. Diseases happen. But often a lot of the folks compare to this current pandemic to some of the flus. And one of the flu that we endured, the turn of the last century, right after World War I, was the Spanish influenza. It happened because soldiers caught stuff in and around Europe and brought it home. And it killed millions of people. That's why, when I know people have been affected by this pandemic, but this pandemic has not been a pandemic like a pandemic. Okay? I hope you understand what I'm saying. I have deepest respect for those who have lost loved ones, but the amount of carnage of this pandemic is not anything like a real pandemic. Because even with the Spanish flu, you were going down the road everywhere seeing bodies outside. We have not seen that. So that was the real deal. That is scary, soil your drawers kind of stuff. That's what's going on. And so that's what they were experiencing, the real deal. Verse 19 I thought was interesting. It talked about that their pride would be broken. Everything that they're proud of. And you'll think about that with national pride. Every country, every person, wherever they are, they're proud of where they're from. Right? They just are. But these folks, they would not be proud of that anymore. In other words, where are you from? I'm from Greece. Yeah, that's where I'm from. But you have a weird Hebrew accent, though. Oh, no. You might think I'm from Israel, but I'm not really from Israel. No. In other words, they would not be proud. They would not be proud of where they were from. They would want to deny it. They would be broken that way. Verse 20 says that their land would not yield its increase. In other words, they would plant. They'd put stuff out there. And it says somewhere where they would plant 7 seeds and only get one. Only get one thing. It's just like hardly anything. So they're not getting the return. Verse 22, it says, even nature itself would begin to turn against them. You know, that's the thing for our worldview. You know, when we see natural disasters happening, I don't like to always blame everything on God. I really don't. But I know that natural disasters can happen. They can be used by God as disciplinary measures. So that's true. Again, I wouldn't name and peg God on every disaster. I'm hesitant to do that. But in Israel's case, it would have been. Definitively. God's like, okay, you're dependent on me for the rains and stuff. Well, okay. I'm going to withhold rains, or I'm going to give you so much rain, I'm going to wipe you out. Aha. I mean, even Moses saw that. Remember when the people, they were all like, we're hungry, Moses. We want meat. And God's like, okay, let's send some meat. He sends a whole bunch of quails in there. They get so much of the quail. They had KFC over and over. They were eating it up. But then they weren't reverent about it. They weren't thankful. They were like animals. And God said, okay, let's see how you are. And don't get grossed out. But it turned rotten within their own mouths. And had other critters involved. It's just be nice that way. But then it rotted within their own mouths. And punished them. So just, bad news. Nothing messes up a meal than that. Just like, oh no. I hate it when you're like, you bite that apple and you only see half the worm. You remember? It's just like oh! So that's their life. That's where they were at. Remember, previously they said they would have so much food that they would be able to get rid of the extras. We do that. We're constantly cleaning out our fridge. We're obviously not starving. Otherwise, how we would clean out that fridge, we'd be eating everything right off the bone. There would be nothing left. But no, we got extras. We don't need that. And that's where they were. But now that's not where they would be. Starvation. It said that the ladies would be making food, and they had 10 ladies. They would have to portion it out. That's what it talks about in verse 26. Starvation, no extra food. In fact, reduced to meager ration. This made me think immediately of the story of the siege of Leningrad. Many people are familiar with Stalingrad. That's where where Hitler was. His German army was defeated within the city. But Leningrad was up north, and it was surrounded early on in World War II when the Germans invaded. And they immediately, they didn't know it all happened so fast that they couldn't get their food stores. And so they were down to meager rations. Everybody, they were measuring it out in the slightest amount of kilograms, and that's what you would get to survive. And of course, most of the people are not surviving, and they're dying. And that's what happens. And I just picture that. It's just like, but yesterday we had this. No, sorry. Now it's down to this, and it gets down to this. That little itty bitty bit. That's what you're eating. Elsewhere, it said it would get so bad that they would commit cannibalism. And that, when we think of siege and war, it's just that we just can't even imagine that's how bad it would get. But that's exactly. Israel talked, especially there was the incident where the king was going through the streets, and he sees the ladies arguing where somebody had murdered their other child. And covered it up by switching it around so that they would live. And that's the horror. The Bible does not pull back the punches on that. That's how horrible it would be. Remember, all of this, as I'm continuing on, all of this is because, if you look through Leviticus 26 multiple times, if you want to turn around, if you want to change directions, if you want to change your mind, and they don't. So everything, all the horror that is here is self-induced. So that makes it even harder to realize they brought it upon themselves. And when you think about it in our own lives, there's often that is the case, isn't it? When certain things happen in our lives, some things are unmistakably product of our own choices. That's just the way it is. You know, it's just some things we can't. That's where I'm always careful about that. Why did such and such a thing happen? Well, sometimes it happens. You know, and you just got to figure out. Then you allow the Lord to redeem a circumstance. So I'm always careful about blaming the Lord on everything. But usually, if I'm talking about self-induced things, if you're thinking about something, more than likely, you know. You're aware of a self-induced thing in your own life that is by your own choices. And that's where these guys were at. In verse 29-32 talks about that it would be so bad, their land would become so bad that when the enemies would come into it, at the end of verse 32, it says that the enemies themselves would be appalled by what they conquered. They're like, oh man, we conquered this trash pile? Ugh, what were we fighting so hard for this for? That's how they'd be appalled by it. Verse 33, 38, and 39 talks about the ideas that they would be dispersed. This is where Daniel's getting an understanding. Daniel is at this point, he's part of that dispersal. He was taken away from his land, and now he's over, now what was Babylon, what Medo-Persia, is going to eventually become conquered by Alexander the Great, so he's in Medo-Persian right now, working with them. But they were part of this dispersion. Israel was taken by the Assyrians, moved all the way around the world. This eventually would happen again after Jesus' time. Another diaspora, if you will. They were scattered even again. But remember, here in the book of Acts, when all the folks were coming there, and it says they were there for Pentecost, and he lists off a whole bunch of nationalities of who was there, because they were all the Jews that were scattered around the world coming back to celebrate Passover. And so there they were. So these guys were scattered everywhere. Remember that the 70 years of Sabbath was Jeremiah prophesied. Well, that was initiated within this curse. Leviticus, Charlie, this is where you can go and bring it up. Leviticus 26, verse 34 and 35 says, then the land, so this is in the curse, so this is what's going on. The land shall enjoy its Sabbath as long as it lies desolate. While you are in the enemy's land, then the land shall rest and enjoy its Sabbath. As long as it lies desolate, it shall have rest, and the rest that it did not have on your Sabbath when you were dwelling in it. So that's why they were out of it. They were never giving the land the Sabbath. So that's the problem. It's like, now it can rest. You didn't trust me there. We talked about that. Every 7 years they were supposed to give the land a rest and trust God for provision. He said he would. He said, I will provide you more. I will provide you so much that you will be able to throw away extras. That's how I'm going to provide for you. And they did not trust God. That was the bottom line. I saw just an interesting premise of a book the other day where the guy talked about 3 words that would change your life. I thought, well, that's interesting. What would those be? And the 3 words, very intriguing, which Israel would know. God is here. Think about it. He's here. God is here right now. He's watching us. He's in our hearts. He sees what's going on. He knows our thoughts. He knows everything. God is here. He's not far off. He's not in some galaxy far away. He's here. And He knows us. He's relating to us intimately. He is here. Problem is I forget. That's the problem. And that's what they were dealing with themselves. Now, you'll notice that I held it out there like verse 35. Because next week, I'm going to include the last part of Leviticus 26 there. Go ahead and read ahead. I don't want to stop you, but read ahead. Because then he talks about, again, how he's going to bring them back. See, that's our God. He's like, I am going to take you out. I'm going to put you down, not to destroy you utterly, but so that He can raise them back up. That's what He does. His restoration, it's just like, we must always remember, God has a heart for restoration. Paul had to deal with that in Corinthians. 1 Corinthians, he said, get that guy, that one guy that's sleeping with his dad's mom, get him out. But then in 2 Corinthians, he's like, hey, okay, he said he's sorry. He's repented. Get him back in here. If you forgive him, I forgive him, let's restore. That's the deal. That's how God works. That's why Daniel, as he continues on, he has this to say, Daniel 9:12. So Daniel's been reading this, and this is what he says. He, now would be the Lord, has confirmed His words. Daniel knows that. He's lived it. He has lived it. He is over here. He saw it. He was probably there during the siege when Babylon was there putting the city to siege. He saw it as a young man. He saw starvation. He saw the end coming. He saw defeat. He's lived it. He's been taken away from his home. Now he's over here. And Daniel, as we'll see throughout Daniel, even though the rest of Israel goes back, he's too old to go back. He can't make the travel. So he ends up staying there. But still, though, he is yearning for that home. And he says, He, the Lord, He has confirmed His words, which He spoke against us. And there it is again. He's not against them. It's against us. Against our rulers who ruled us by bringing upon us a great calamity. That word for calamity there, great calamity, means it's like great evil, great wickedness. It's like this is what's brought upon us. For under the whole heaven, and this was interesting, he says, for under the whole heaven there has not been done anything like what has been done against Jerusalem. And when I was looking at that, I was like, hold on a minute. Hold on a minute here, Daniel. Come on, you've seen other places get wiped out. You've seen other cultures. I mean, shoot, Israel came in and took out Canaan. I'm sure they kind of felt the same way. So what makes this different, Daniel? What makes what happened to Jerusalem so different? Well, here's the idea. It would be no different if all the beliefs of everybody else in the world was equally legitimate. If religion was just a man-made construct, but everybody just trying to make up something, then it would be the same. And Daniel would be wrong. But they are not. They are not. They are not the same. Israel alone was the only God's chosen people. The only God. There is no other gods. There is no other gods at all. They do not exist. And so, all the other false gods that would be out there would, as a matter of reality, let down their worshipers. That's a matter of reality, because if you're praying to a God that is really not there, you're really not getting anything. It's like playing a telephone game, or remember back in the day when you take the two tin cans, put the string on there, and talk to one another over the string? But it only worked if the other person was holding on to the other end. In this case, the godless world, they have the can, but there's nobody out there. Only Israel. That's what made Israel, when I talked about earlier, when they were emancipated. The plagues was not just against the Egyptians, it was against the Egyptian so-called gods. They had gods for everything. And God was saying to them, because He's not just doing this to save Israel, He's doing this to make a religious, theological statement in the most definitive of terms. He's like, your God of the river is not a God of the river. Your God of frogs, not a God of frogs. Your God is a God of light, not a God of light. Your God holds light and darkness? No, He doesn't. I do. Your God holds life and death? No, I do. I do all these things. None of your gods are gods. Egypt. That's what He was helping them to understand. And so when Daniel is saying nothing like this has ever happened, because what he's getting at is what I shared before. Jerusalem had this, and he's using Jerusalem as a gathering statement. They enjoyed a relationship with the one only living almighty God. And for them that's why this would be unheard of. He's like, He was really there, and yet they really rejected Him and paid the very real consequences. That's what he's getting at. Yeah, nothing under heaven had been done like that before. So, that's what magnifies the tragedy. Makes it even more tragic. The God, they act, He in the end, they spurned the only living God. He acted not in salvation, but in judgment. Again, earlier I said, some people, as I conclude today, it's just like, some people say, well, is this the rules, these rules, could it be for our country? Well, I don't know, could be. In principle, possibly. But again, context is about Israel. But I happen to believe that God has blessed us as a nation because we have sought to be, tried to be, generally tended to be a God-fearing nation. But many people are saying that that is changing, and I see it. I mean, I love the quote allegedly from Anne Graham Lotz, where they were bugging her about all the things that were happening. And it's like, why could God allow this? Why would God do this? And she's like, well, why would God not? We don't want Him here. Mm-hmm. Why would He not do these things? And she was right on the money. Right on the money. That's where shared with you last week. I was reading Dinesh D'Souza's book, What's So Great About Christianity. Great book. But he brings out a really legitimate point. That if the Lord tarries, the leaders of the church, it's not going to be America or Europe. It's going to be the African leaders and the South American Christians. Because there, Jesus Christ is making headway. There, they are really there on fire. I mean, just like take a look at the one church, I think it was the Episcopalian church. They were debating about whether or not they were going to ordain same-sex relationships. And it was the African ones that were saying, hey, our Bibles say that that's wrong, and so why is there even an argument? Yes. They're the ones taking the leadership. God bless them. So there it is. So yeah, like I said, you can take a look at that. think about that, chew on that. But eventually, context is about Israel. So we have to keep that in mind. What about for us as believers? Just everyday believers. Because everything Daniel's been talking about is national stuff.
Yes.
Not just individual stuff. But as believers in Christ, we know that anybody who knows anything knows we're not under the law. But we're under grace. So how does this apply then? What does that mean? Well, I turn to one of the greatest champions of grace, and that would be Paul. Paul in his little 6-chapter letter to Galatians, which is like a mini Romans put together, very concise, power punch. He had the Bruce Lee punch right there with that little letter. Points out grace, points out the beauty of grace, points out everything like that. But towards the very end, he does have a stern warning, which I think we all should pay attention to. Galatians 6, verse 7 and 8, he says, "Do not be deceived." That's us, talking to a church. Believers, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever one sows, that he will also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption. But the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. So there it is. Got to watch it. I mean, he warned elsewhere. He said he tells them, it's like, well, hey, just because we're saved from grace doesn't mean we can just sin away. And he says, may it not ever be. In other words, there's an idea there. Got to pay attention. But right after this, he still gives, God bless him, Paul is so good. He gives encouragement right after that. It says in Galatians 6:9, the next verse, it says, "And let us not grow weary in doing good. For in due season we will reap, and do not give up." That's the idea. In other words, I believe that once you have accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior, you're saved. But then the rest of your life is now being built upon. As he says elsewhere, he says you build upon that place you can build with precious things. The gold, metal, silver. In other words, the things that are good, the things that are godly, the things where you're depending on God. Or he says you can build it with wood, hay, and stubble. He says in the end, all that will be put to fire, figuratively speaking, to test it. And he said, some of you will be saved, but with smoking underwear. I always love that. That's Paul's picture. I just like, Paul, that was such great imagery. It's like, yep, I'll be one of those guys. They'll be like, something smells like burnt underwear. It's like, oh boy, it's amazing. Woo! But there it is. It's still the warning all the same. All the same. In other words, we shouldn't just look at Israel and say, oh, that was them. I got nothing to worry about. No, we should pay attention. That's why there's so many warnings. Be holy, as he is holy. Those are the things that tell us about how we walk and how we live. Got to pay attention to those things. You can't just willy-nilly. Alrighty? Father God, I just thank you for this time. Father, I just thank you for the opportunity to speak this word, Lord. Father, I pray that our hearts would absorb that tragedy. Father, I just pray for us. I pray for us as individuals. I pray for us as a land, as a church. Father, I know that those blessings and curses was for those folks. But Lord, the principles sure do seem to stand true for the outworkings of them. Seems to be there to a certain extent. And I pray, Father, I pray for us as a church, for us individually, that, Lord, we would follow you. That we would remember you. We would not take and abuse the grace of our salvation. Father, help us when we have. Father, I pray for our nation. Well, first I want to pray for your church. It's your church. You love your bride. And Lord, I pray that the church of America would turn around. I pray that there would be revival, that we would stop worshiping our comfort, stop worshiping our stock market, stop worshiping our success, and that, Lord, we would begin to worship you. Father, I pray for our nation, Lord. Lord, I pray that they would remember that there really is a God. And that this fantasy that they've generated, that they're trying to put forward, a fantasy world without God, that, Lord, truly they would see it as it is. It's just a fantasy. That God, oh Lord God, our El Shaddai, our Master, El Elyon, you are real. As Francis Schaeffer's book said, he is there and he is not silent. I just praise you for that. Lord, open up our eyes, open up our ears to register the voice of our God again. Let us hearken unto your words and not just hear them, but to live them. I just ask this by the grace and mercy of our loving God, through the name of his Son. Amen. Praise the Lord.